need someone to talk to and you don't know what to do, call us 214-4400 when you're feeling all alone and they turn their back on you. Call us 214-4400. Call us 214-4400. Call us 214-4400. Call us.
You're listening to the Kind Counseling Podcast. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now back to the show. Welcome to the Kind Counseling Podcast. It's your host, Cammie Roberts, and we're here for another episode. And today, guys, we got a great show for you. We have a special guest, brother I know from way back. He's here to visit us and give us some insights. And just before we introduce him, just to let you guys know that we still have the Kind Counseling merch on our website. Just go to the shop and it goes one of the sweaters I'm rocking right now. So let me push you on back right here. There you go. All right. So we just want to jump in we have a professional speaker and educator, Mr. Marc Williams. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. It's so great to be here with you, reconnected with you, and talking with you. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
All right, good, man. So Marc, tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Like, what are you doing these days? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Man, all right. So I'm not going to roll out all the tape in one shot, but I will say this: I do a lot of professional development work for the New York City school system. Okay. And that traces all the way back to being a school leader and a school teacher and a student in this New York City public school system, where I discovered, before I really knew it, my love for speaking and coaching and training and presentation. And so I say all that to say that as much as I enjoy being in the school system, what also gets me up every morning, gets me jumping out of bed, is the work that I do as a professional speaker, especially around the topic of achieving against all odds. I really believe in the human potential. And I also do a lot of presentation coaching. That's probably really the core of what people come to me when they need help, when they want to become more comfortable, more confident, more dynamic in front of a group, or if they want to create content that they want to share because they want to shape their message. And that has led me to a lot of stages, including competitive speaking, in addition to that motivational speaking. And it has also led me to my biggest project to date, which is something called the Speaker Skills Academy, which is a evolution of the way that we help people to become great at speaking. So that wraps up being an educator, a speaker, and a teacher of those who want to become great at speaking.
So, all right. So as you guys can see, he's a professional, right? I mean, you got the voice, you got the presence, I'm just saying. So, all right. So how did you, like from when you were a kid, like, did you get up and give speeches in front of a class, or like, how did this whole thing come to you?
Listen, when I was a kid, I was as shy as a shy could be.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was the quiet kid. And listen, to some extent, I'm still a quiet person, but there's something about that front of the room that triggers and wakes me up, right? But here's the story I always love to tell. If you want to know how shy Marc Williams was as a kid, then I got to take you back to the second grade when I was in Miss McIntyre's class, right? And as far as I'm concerned, we've all had a Mrs. McIntyre. She was tough. She meant business. She pushed us further than we thought we could go. She taught us in the second grade long division with multiple digits. This woman was serious about what she expected from us and what she knew we could produce. I respect it to this day. But there was one day she traumatized me.
Mm.
Straight up traumatized me. So it was during the holiday season, and she had us singing these Christmas songs. And the one song that she picked for us to sing was The Little Drummer Boy.
All right. Okay.
I hate the song. The
All right.
Little like I can't stand that song, and it's all because Mrs. McIntyre could tell in a room of like 5,000 people, the
Mm.
one person singing off key.
Okay. All right. All right.
And she was like, listen, somebody's singing off key. And she looked around the room and she pointed me out. And she said,
Okay.
Mark, I want you to sing by yourself. And that's when all the tears started flushing down my face.
All right.
That was the moment that I was put on spot to
Uh-huh.
do something in front of people. And that was the moment that potentially could have put me in a shell.
Mm. Okay.
I now treasure that moment because I look back at that moment and I realize that as scared as I was to speak up or to sing out in front of people, I
Mm.
look back at that moment now as a measure of how far I've been able to come. So, no, Mark Williams was not the speaker and not the storyteller, but something triggered in me and it has come out. And I will tell you, and I'll speak upon this a little bit later on as it comes into conversation.
Mm.
Here's the impetus for my speaking. As a
Okay.
kid,
Mm.
I was incredibly imaginative.
Mm.
And I
Okay.
think my imagination has helped me with speaking.
How so? If you could expand on that a little.
Because, when we're kids, and I'm sure you know this, right? When we're kids, we just have this world in
Mm.
our heads,
Right.
right? And sometimes it's an escape from a world that we're in. Sometimes it's a dream of a world we want to be a part of.
Mm.
And as a kid, and I grew up with very little means, right? I mean, we it was tough growing up in Brooklyn, New York.
All right.
And, mom was single, welfare, like the whole like what you can
Mm.
imagine, like it was tough.
Right.
And I used to sit on my bed and I used to like make up worlds and make up people. And at the end of the day, all of this make believe stuff was really just a manifestation of what I would hope to achieve in life. And
Mm.
so at the end of the day, as a kid, my imagination
Mm.
really the impetus for storytelling, right? At the end of the day, that's what I was doing as a kid. I was creating new stories for myself that I would hope I could one day live out. And I say imagination then becomes the impetus for speaking because as someone who taps into your imagination and then taps into your imagined stories,
Mm.
it's that exercise of storytelling that is
Mm.
often the most comfortable and the most engaging type of speaking. So imagination made me a storyteller, and storytelling made me a speaker.
Okay. Imagination, storytelling, speaking. All right. All right. So if I do that, I'll be a great speaker. That's what you
You'll be on the road.
All right. You're listening to the Kind Counseling Podcast. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now back to the show. So okay. From a mental health perspective, right? You always hear people. I've always heard. I don't know how they gauge this, but that public speaking is the number one fear that people have. Supposedly, I don't know who researched, but what are your thoughts on
Oh, it's terrifying.
it? Okay.
It's terrifying. For most people, it is terrifying. I heard a joke from Jerry Seinfeld that said people are so scared to speak in public that if they were at a funeral, they'd rather be in the casket than give the eulogy, right? Like, wow,
Okay.
wow,
Okay.
right?
All right.
I believe it's a real fear, but the fear is not around opening our mouths. The fear is around what we think people will think about what comes out of our mouths and what people will think about how we are expressing ourselves. Speaking is so scary because we have a fear of being judged. We have a fear of being evaluated. We have a fear of what other people are thinking. Um, and I find that that's when I work with people and I coach people,
Right.
that's usually what people are talking about. Like I'm just afraid of how people are going to come across, or if they're not going to understand me, or if they're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about, or they're going to hear me stumbling upon my words. All of it is about what other people are thinking, and that's very human. That's
Right.
very human. So I
Right.
think that's why speaking is the number one fear behind death.
God, that's okay. All right. So what do you do as a speaking coach to help people to, whether it's relax or help people to be focused? What do you do exactly?
You know, that's such a great question. And right now, I'm thinking of a person who came to me and said,
Hmm.
I'm struggling because English is not my first language.
Okay.
And because of that, I am uncomfortable with how I come across in front of other people. And I may even write down things that I want to say before I open my mouth, and I'll almost read it word for word, just so people don't think something
Hmm.
poorly about me.
All right.
So during one of our sessions,
Hmm.
I introduced to her what I'll share with you and everybody who's watching. I would start off with the emotions.
All right.
A lot of times we're worried about what people will think about the message or the content that's coming out of our mouths. And we're
Hmm.
worried that we're not going to make sense, or we're not going to be clear, or we're not going to sound smart.
Okay.
So I try to help people to put that logic piece to the side for a moment
Hmm.
and step into your emotions. So one of the things that I like to introduce is, on this planet we live in, there are 6 emotions that no matter where you are in the world,
Hmm.
people will recognize it. People recognize when we're happy.
All
They can
right.
see it on your face when you're
Right.
sad,
Yeah.
when you're mad, when you're scared, when you're surprised, and they can
Mhm.
tell when you're disgusted. Those are the 6 most common emotions in the world.
Okay.
So I introduce those 6 emotions to people,
Mhm.
and then I ask them simply, tell me about it. Pick one of these emotions, right? Let's just say it's happy, right?
Okay.
Tell me about a time when something or someone made you happy. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna ask you to do that.
You asking me to do
I'm gonna ask you to do that. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you to do that. Think about a time, something when something or someone made you happy.
it? Okay. All right. All right. Okay.
What comes to mind?
Oh, I have to share it?
He's like, wait, I thought I was interviewing you. You
Okay. All right. All right. So let me see. All right. So um that might be a little too personal. Oh gosh.
All right, listen. I know I put you on the spot. I know I put you on the spot,
Yeah,
right?
you did. You
I did,
did.
I did, I did. And I recognize that, right?
All right.
And during a coaching session, it's a little bit different, right? Because the world is not watching. It's just the two of
Right.
us, right?
Right.
So I asked this person to share a moment. And I will tell you, for about 3 different emotions, something came to mind, a story came to mind.
Right.
And I remember her commenting, wow, this is probably the first time that I've never had to write down what I was going to say,
Mm.
because I knew how I felt in the moment, and I knew the moment that made me feel that way. And I could just, you don't have to script the lived experience. You've been through it,
True. True.
right?
Right.
So after she had that revelation during our session,
Mm-hmm.
she then wrote to me an email a couple of days later and said that she was at a meeting where she was asked to speak, and she thought about her emotions. And from that, she was able to come up with something she could say during that meeting. And again, it was the first time she didn't have to script anything. She didn't feel chained or tied up and or tongue tied. She
Mm-hmm.
just spoke freely from her own lived experience. So when you ask me, how do I help people to deal with that fear?
Right.
First thing is tap into your emotions, right? We are most comfortable when we talk about our emotions, and we're most comfortable and most fluent when we tell our stories. We're
Mm.
so busy trying to sound smart all the time. You know, the one thing you don't have to try to be smart about?
What's that?
Your own experience.
All right, but what if okay, but what if you're the person who says like, well, you know, maybe you came from a family where you didn't have a voice, right? Where you were told to just stay in the corner and be quiet, like nobody cares what you have to say, right? I mean, a lot of people have come from families, and your mindset is one of like, what I have to say is not important, right? How would that person now transition over to I'm speaking in front of 50 or 100 or 1,000 people and they really want to hear what I have to say, even though I've been conditioned to think my whole life that nobody wants to hear what I have to say.
That's an excellent question, and I can relate to that because it took me a long time to share my own story
Mm, okay.
until, and I can tell you how this moment happened, but I'll say this first. Until I realized that there are other people out there
Mm,
just like you,
that's true.
right? One of the hardest parts about life and humanity, I find, is that we
Mm,
often think we're the only ones going through something,
exactly. Right.
right?
Right.
And once I realized there's other people out there who might be going through the same thing.
Mm,
And if there's something that I have either learned that has helped me along the way, or
mm,
learned to help me get out of a situation,
mm,
then if I could find it within myself to share that,
mm.
that could be helpful to somebody else. See,
Okay.
here's the answer to that question from me.
All right.
When it comes to speaking, we should remember this is not about me.
That's interesting. Okay. Okay.
Even when you're telling your story,
Right.
the reason why you're telling your story is not for people to learn about you. It's for people to find out something about themselves.
Mm,
And there might be something from your experience, even as somebody who might have been sitting in a family room told, don't speak up.
right.
Your voice is not valuable.
Right.
I don't know if there's anybody who's ever come across you who did appreciate your value. I don't
Right.
know if there was something in your head that you wanted to get out that you knew, but there's somebody else like that out there. And
Mm.
if they could hear how you got through or how you dealt with it, it could be helpful for somebody else. That is why we speak for other people.
So that's interesting because I think, I mean, I believe all of us are created with like a certain gift or a talent, but it's really for other people. Like I think, like what you just said. So do you have an example of somebody who was that came to you and they were just like either painfully shy or maybe they had a lot of anxiety and then you helped them to become a good or great speaker. I mean, like, you have a story like that?
I was teaching public speaking to high school seniors.
Mm,
First day of class.
okay.
After I did the first day of school teacher thing, and This one student came up to me
Mm,
at the end of class and she goes, Mr. Williams, with all
mm,
due respect, I can't do this.
mm.
She goes,
Okay.
there's a public speaking class, right? I'm like, yeah, just, I can't do this. She says straight up, I've been asked to do presentations for other teachers, and I have literally cried, and they would give me something else to do. Like,
Mm,
I'm terrified. I can't do this.
mm.
And I remember saying to her at the time, that public speaking class, I mean, if you know anything about high school
Right.
graduation requirements,
Right.
at least in New York City, right? You
Right.
need your 8 credits of English.
Mm,
And in our school, one of those English credits was a public speaking class. So at the end of the day, this young lady couldn't even graduate
mm.
without taking this class.
Okay.
So I said, listen, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to work with you. And so for the first, I would say, couple of weeks of class,
Mm,
I would let her speak from her desk, sitting at her desk.
okay.
That was her comfort level. I just let her do it. Met
Mm,
her where she need, right? They talk about meeting people where, where
right.
they are.
Right.
That's where she was, so that's where I met her.
Okay.
So she would chime in a little bit from her desk. And as I observed and saw, she might say a little bit more.
Mm,
And then I'd ask her to stand up by the desk at least. You don't have to come all the way up to the front of the room, but at least stand by your desk and speak. And by the way, these weren't assignments where she was being graded. These were just little conversations or, many things that we do in class to develop these skills.
mm.
So she went from sitting at the desk and talking and standing up by the desk and talking. And I won't say that I inched her closer and closer to the front of the room, but I
Mm,
will say that by the end of that course, she was able to make it up to the front of the room. And I'll never forget
okay.
her last speech for the class was a persuasive speech. It was
Mm.
about how marijuana should be legal.
Okay.
And she brought in a visual aid.
Okay.
It was construction paper rolled.
Okay. All right. All right.
She found the courage to do it.
Mm,
And what I would say when I look back at that is we have to ease into this. You
mm.
can't just, one of the biggest mistakes we make, either as educators when it
Uh,
comes to public speaking, or as individuals when we're trying to get up in front of the room, you can't just throw me in the water. You know that metaphor? Just throw them in the water. They'll learn how to
right.
swim.
Right.
That way it doesn't work. We can't just throw you up in front of the room and ask you to speak.
Mm, okay.
We got to dip your toe in the pool.
Mm,
Get you to speak a little bit, maybe in a small conversation or with a couple of people, and then get in, maybe add a couple of more people to the mix. Get you up closer to the room. We've got to ease into this and
mm.
give ourselves small little, what I like to call speaking drills or speaking exercises that we can do so that we can build that muscle. Stop throwing yourself in the pool. Ease yourself in front of the room.
Okay.
Mm,
All right.
yeah.
So you mentioned earlier, right, that you're speaking competitions like international, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm just real quick, and then I'll get to my question. Like, how like, where? I've never heard of these competitions. So, where are these competitions?
Yeah, yeah. It's not televised like American Idol, right?
I mean, I don't know.
It's not. So I've been a member of Toastmasters International for about 13 going on 14 years.
Okay.
And I joined because I was interested in professional speaking as a career.
Right.
And after I joined, I learned that they do this thing called the International Speech Contest or the World Championship of Public Speaking. There are about 30,000 people who compete in this contest. There's
Okay.
about 8 rounds that you have to go through. And those who get to the finals out of the 30,000 people who start out,
All right.
only 8 people make it to the final stage.
Okay. And you made the final stage?
I am blessed and honored to say that I've been to the final stage 3 times.
Really?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, this past year,
All right.
2024, and
Yeah.
the year before that, 2023. So
Right.
2 years in a row, I made it all the way to the finals.
So I'm in the presence of greatness.
Ah, I feel blessed and honored that you say that. I
Oh,
was blessed to come up with a message and to come up with a way to express it and to deliver it that took me to that world stage. Um,
okay.
yeah, and it's an amazing, amazing opportunity for a number of reasons. One,
Mm,
because the further you move on in the contest,
mm,
the more seasoned speakers you get to meet.
mm.
More importantly, the more seasoned speakers you get to learn from.
Okay. Okay.
And you start to just hear how different people are shaping messages and delivering their messages. And there's a challenge here because the one thing I'll say about the contest is you can do the same speech for the first 7 rounds.
Okay.
Those who make it to the finals has to be a completely different speech.
All right. Okay.
And actually, what I would even say is for those of us who have made it all the way to the semifinals,
Mm,
even across the first 7 rounds of that contest, your original speech is going to change. Why? Because people give you feedback, they give
mm.
you things to think about,
Okay.
and you listen to that feedback and you incorporate what people are saying. And if I may say this, when we talk about how do we help people to become better and more comfortable with speaking,
Right.
as much as we're afraid of what other people think,
Mm,
it's often what other people think that's going to
mm.
help us to design a better message.
That's interesting. Okay.
Well, if somebody says, I didn't get that,
Right.
okay, what that tells me is I've either got to add something in or I've got to reshape that message to make it clear. Oh, I know you were trying to be funny, but I didn't laugh. Well, that tells me that I got to go. I was watching, and this is a quick tangent. I was watching a video of Nikki Glazer, who just hosted the
Right.
Golden Globes.
Right.
And she spoke about a joke. I don't remember the exact joke that she told, but
Mm,
she ended up using the word when. No, she ended up using the word after instead of the word when.
mm.
And at first, when I heard that, I'm like, big deal. It's just a word.
Right.
And she explained how, first of all, when she wrote the joke,
Right.
she meant to use the word when. But
Okay.
she used the word after, and in her head, she was
Mm-hmm.
standing there trying not to be in her head because she knew she messed up the wording. And she
Right.
said it's so important because one word
Yeah.
can have an entirely different meaning and change a joke into
Right.
something serious.
Right.
So we need that kind of feedback. We need people telling us, I didn't get that. That wasn't funny. That was too serious. We
Mm.
need that. Or you weren't loud enough, or you were talking too low, right? We need that kind of feedback. If we really want to change lives, listen to what people are thinking and
Mm.
incorporate and shape that. And if I may add, but don't listen to everything.
Right. Okay. Right. Right. So yeah, you heard?
Just to learn how to filter out what makes sense to you
Right.
and filter in what makes sense to you.
Okay. All right. So now, so when did you realize that you were a great speaker? Right? Because to get into these competitions and get into the final round, you can't be average, obviously. So when did in your life, like when did you realize that you were a great speaker?
Wow. I don't know if anybody's ever really asked me that. And there's a part of me that says, I'm still working on it, right?
Come on, man. You being humble right now.
Here's a moment that stands out to me as you ask that question.
All right.
2014,
Right.
I was in pursuit of the World Championship of Public Speaking. I delivered a talk called Short on Confidence.
All right.
And it was probably maybe the third round of the contest after I delivered the speech. This one guy who's an excellent speaker, I highly respect him. He came up to me and he goes, what you just said changed my thinking. What you just said really connected with me. And when he said that, I knew that I was onto something in terms of my development. That meant that I had gotten past the point of somebody saying, hey, you're a great speaker.
All right.
And their comment was not about me as a speaker. It was about what they felt. Remember that comment? Maya Angelou, people quote this one all the time.
All right.
People may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Right.
You will know you're a great speaker when people comment to you about how they felt or how they think differently or how they now act differently because of something they heard. That's when you become a great speaker.
Okay. All right. We got another question for you, right? So now, who is someone that people consider a great speaker that you, in your professional opinion, don't necessarily agree with? You know, somebody where people just say, "Oh man, this guy's such a great," and you're like, anybody come to mind?
You coming with the questions today. Man.
I mean, I'm assuming you looked at a lot of speeches. I mean, I'm assuming.
Wow. Nobody famous, well-known comes to mind. There's a person in my own personal journey who some might say falls into this category.
Okay.
And I think it's because he comes across as somebody who knows what he's talking about.
All right.
And I think in a lot of ways he does. But I think for even the things he has no idea about, he still talks about it as if he knows what he's talking about, right? You talk about some people who are afraid to speak, and then there are people who say they're not afraid to speak, but they're really talking a whole bunch of nonsense.
Right. Right. I got you.
So that's a leader who I've heard people say, oh, he's a great speaker. And I'm like, I think he still has some work. Now, what I will say, and I said this to somebody that I'm starting to work with now, I believe in leveraging our strengths. So if you notice the way that I talked about this person, I acknowledge that there are some things that he does well. And I think what happens sometimes as speakers or as communicators, people in general, sometimes we're so busy trying to emulate somebody else and trying to be somebody else that we're not being authentic. You know? Or sometimes we're trying to be what everybody thinks we should be. Case in point, I help a lot of people with their interviewing.
Oh, job interview? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And I tell people all the time, forget the questions, remember the stories. And why do I say that? Because at the end of the day, you don't know what question they're going to ask you. That's one. You kind of
Okay.
have some general vague idea of the types of questions, but you don't know what they're going to ask you. And you don't know what they're looking for. I don't care what JD job description is out there in the world. At the end of the day, somebody's sitting across the table and they know what they're looking for,
Right.
but you don't really know what they're looking for. So I tell people, stop trying to go into the room and try to present yourself as what they need. Just
Okay.
present who you are.
Mm.
And if they like it, great. And
Right.
if they don't like it, okay. But if
Right.
they like a version of you that is
Mm.
not the real you, then when
Right.
you show up to that job, it's probably not going to be a very good experience. So just give them who you are.
Okay. I got another question. So you think people that use the teleprompter, like they're really good speakers, or you feel like that's like that just came to my mind.
You
you,
picking
you
on
feel
these
like they're
teleprompter,
like, what'd you say?
you picking on these teleprompter people, huh?
No, I'm just saying, like, as you know, well, what do you think?
I used to
Yeah.
have less respect for reading off a teleprompter because
Okay.
I never liked to read, right? It doesn't feel natural.
Right. Right. Right.
And then I started to learn, especially presidents, right?
Right.
And I'll highlight Barack Obama right now, right? Barack Obama is the poster child for
Right.
the public speaker extraordinaire, right?
Right. Right.
Barack reads off of teleprompters.
Right.
Clinton read off teleprompters,
Right.
right? They have speech writers.
Right.
They're going around doing so much, and in politics, the wording, the exact wording is so critical for them
Mm. Okay.
that they have teleprompters.
Right.
I don't have the issue with the teleprompter.
Okay.
What I have an issue with
Mm.
is you not practicing and preparing
Mm.
before you get up in front.
Mm.
If all you do is,
Mm.
somebody wrote something for me, now
Mm.
I'm going to show up and just read what's on the screen,
Right.
that's not cutting it.
I got you.
But if I know what the content is and I
Right.
practice it and I read it over and I sort of start to internalize it or kind of outline it in my brain, so I don't have to like look at it so much, but I kind of know it in my head,
Mm.
that's all right. See, when Barack Obama talks, I could tell that's not the first time he's interacted with those words. He's interacted, he's internalized that message, and now he's speaking.
Got
So
you.
it's not the teleprompter, it's the preparation that is the real key.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because I used to have a terrible fear of police. Like, I mean, I would get really nauseous and other kinds of stuff. you know, and then someone told me that if you practice your speeches in front of the mirror, right, and you write it out and you practice in front of your mirror, right, in front of the mirror, you get it's almost like you're speaking in front of someone, right? Even though someone is you, but and amazingly, it helped my anxiety like tremendously, right? So do you have like special like tricks like like things like that?
Yeah. So
All right.
love the mirror thing.
All right.
I love a different piece of glass,
Okay.
the window.
The window. Okay.
Yeah.
Stay
I
put.
love actually using the window and looking outside.
Mm.
And I'm either talking to the plane that's flying by or the rooftop over there or the street light over there. I
Mm.
like to imagine myself talking to an audience.
Mm.
So I actually rarely will practice in front of a mirror because I don't like practicing speaking to myself.
Mm.
But I
Okay.
think the reason why
Right.
speaking in front of a mirror or the window
Mm.
or the TV on mute
Okay.
or the couch, the chair, and the kitchen table
Uh-huh.
I think the reason why all of those work
Right.
is because we have now stepped outside of just reading the words
Mm.
and now getting up and practicing the act of speaking. So when I get prepared to speak,
Mm.
I don't just look over the words. My
Okay.
son, my youngest son, will always make fun of me because he'll
Right.
walk into a room and he'll imitate. He's like, oh, right.
Oh, you use a lot of hands. Okay.
I use my hands, but and he's exaggerating, but what he'll ultimately see is
Mm.
I'm not sitting down and reading my notes. I'm not standing up in one space.
Mm.
I am practicing the way that I aim to deliver that message in front of people.
Okay. Okay.
That's really important. And as a matter of fact, not only do I believe that you should be practicing the body language that you're using in front of people, but I also believe that when you're practicing,
Mm.
you shouldn't do it silently. Even if
Okay.
you're not speaking out loud, I
Right.
believe that you should be moving your mouth and actually using your mouth to mouth out those words. Like your practice session should be as close to what you're actually doing. We don't speak in front of the room like this, sitting
Mm.
down. So why would we practice it? If I were a football player, let me pick on basketball since I'm repping the Knicks, right? If I'm a basketball player,
Right.
I can't go to practice and sit on the bench. That's not
Mm.
how I prepare for the game. I
Got
got
it.
to get up on the floor and shoot the ball. I got
Right.
to practice my form. So it's the
Got it.
same thing with speaking. We have to practice the form. Get up out of your seat, step in front of the mirror, step in
Mm.
front of the window, and practice the way you speak. That's how you get better.
I like that. I like that. So, okay. So, have you ever bombed in a speech where like it was horrible and you're just like, oh, you have? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was just like horrible.
There was, I was speaking in front of a group of college students.
Yeah.
And this one student, after I was done, said, you kind of seem a little inauthentic,
Mm.
like staged, right? It
Right.
felt like you were putting on a performance and you weren't speaking to us.
Mm.
And I have to admit, he caught me out there.
Okay.
And I said to him, I go, I was over practicing and in my head so much
Mm.
that, yeah, um, that's probably why you're getting that feeling.
Mm.
And I say that was a bomb because they never invited me to come back and talk to those kids. You
Okay.
know? But I tell you another one.
All right. All right.
This one wasn't a bomb in terms of the content,
Mm.
but it was a hot summer day. And I was on my
You
way
just
to speak to the client, and I'm racing through the streets of Midtown Manhattan, and
right.
it was hot. And I
Right.
was wearing this tan dress shirt.
All right.
And by the time I got there, it was like a soaking wet brown shirt.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
I sat in that room and they had some AC going on and I never wished that the cold air coming out of the AC would dry up my shirt, but it didn't. And
Mm.
I gave this entire presentation as if I had just jumped in a pool.
Oh my goodness.
And I
Okay.
couldn't stop thinking about it.
All right. All right.
But I had to keep going.
Mm.
I never got called back.
Mm.
And listen, I could sit here and say, oh, maybe the content. Nah, I believe in the content, but
All
I
right.
believe that that was something like, it's the reason why I even think about what I'm wearing when I'm getting up in front of a room.
Mm.
You got to think about all those different things. What's gonna make, what can I do to make sure that I'm not thinking about what people are thinking about me? So if I sweat a lot, Maybe I should wear a black hoodie.
All right, I got you. I got you. So, all right, so Mark, any because I know you got a tight schedule, right? So, any last tips you want to give to people, or anything that just regards to people who struggle with this, or young people who might be petrified to get up in front of class, like any last remarks, anything, words of encouragement you might want to share.
Um, I think what comes to mind for me is two things. One, think of stories you could tell. Be so observant of everything that's going on around you
Okay.
and look for opportunities to share those stories with other people. Like, find ways to incorporate that storytelling into your regular everyday conversations. I think we don't do that enough. I'll tell you that listen, I read a lot, and I definitely read a whole lot more than when I was a kid, right? One of the reasons why I read so much
Mm.
is because I'm looking for material to share.
Okay. Okay.
That's one of my favorite parts about reading. Yeah, I still carry my physical books, and I got a
Right.
pen, and ooh, that's a good story. Let me see how I can tell that story, how I can incorporate it into something. So
Mm.
there's wonderful, and I read a lot of nonfiction stuff, right? So I'm not just talking about fiction, but there's all, or when I watch the news, one of my favorite things to watch every 4 years is the
What is it?
Olympics.
Oh, they do tell a lot of stories.
They tell so many stories,
Right. Right.
and then it's like, or one of my favorite journalists is Hoda Kotb. Hoda Kotb just retired from the Today Show, right?
Okay.
Hoda Kotb used to do every morning. She used to do this thing called the Morning Boost,
Mm.
and the Morning Boost was really a positive, optimistic, uplifting story.
Right.
And I would listen to those, and I'm like, ooh, I love that story. I'm going to find a way to retell that story at some point during the day because it's just a great story to tell. You
Right.
know? And some of those things, I will find a way to connect it to some of the speeches that I'm doing. I
Mm.
read Steve Harvey's book a while ago, and one of the stories I often tell is about the time when he was in school and teacher asked him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he
Mm.
said, "I want to be a TV star." And she said, "Don't be such a class clown and take this seriously."
Mm.
And he
Wow.
went home feeling like sad, and his father came in and was like, "Write down on a piece of paper that you want to be a police officer." He said, "But I don't." I said, "Write down that you want to be a police officer."
Mm.
So he writes it down and goes, "Give that paper to your teacher tomorrow. And as for that piece of paper where you wrote down you want to be a TV star, I want you to keep that paper on the table next to your bed. And I want you to read it every day
Mm.
until it one day comes true."
Mm. That's good.
I love that story. When I read that story, I'm like, I got to retell that story.
Okay.
I talk a lot about overcoming challenges.
Right.
So that's why I incorporate that, because it's a perfect story about overcoming challenges and expectations and overcoming odds and all of those different things. So I
Mm.
say all that to say, I think you asked such a great question. And I go back to storytelling. Storytelling, the history of speaking, it started with people going from town to town to town to
Mm.
share news. What's
Mm.
another word for news? I'll tell you, stories.
Mm.
That's all the news is. It's just another story that's being told. Bless the people in California right now who are dealing with wildfires.
Right.
As we watch all of those stories, and I heard a story the other day about this man who was trying to take his father-in-law home because the home he was living in, like, and they're driving, and then all of a sudden they get the news. You got to get out of your car.
Right.
This fire is too close. Y'all have to stop walking. His father-in-law rather, I don't know if he was in a wheelchair or he was using a crutch or a cane, but like this was going to be hard. And people saw him. And somebody else had a car that was a little bit further up and drove them a little bit further. And it was such an amazing story about human kindness. We're surrounded by so many different stories. So I said the history of speaking is people would go from town to town to town sharing news and sharing stories. So public speaking, the foundation of it is storytelling. So yes, it would be wonderful to give a TED Talk, but even TED Talks are seeped in stories. Yes, it would be wonderful to do a speech as great as I Have a Dream,
Right.
dipped in stories. You take all of your greatest speeches ever told, and there's stories seeped into them. And here's the other perfect thing about stories. Because of the natural structure of a story, you don't have to worry about memorizing it. It's like your own lived experience. I don't have to memorize. I don't have to script. I don't have to put on a teleprompter the story that I lived through, nor the
Right.
story that I saw or observed. So some of our anxiety comes over, oh my God, I forgot what I was going to say and I can't remember. Tell more stories. You'll never have to worry about remembering stories. And as long as that story has a point, one of my best friends, I know there's a long answer to this question, but you just got me excited. So you better sit back and enjoy this. One of my favorite friends, one of my closest friends, I always tell him he is not a public speaker. You will not catch him on stage.
Okay. All right.
But he is one of the absolute best storytellers that I will ever know. And here's why. Because he never tells a story simply for the sake of entertainment. Every story he tells has a point.
Okay.
So it goes back to, remember what I said? This is not about you. This is about other people and what they can learn from you.
Gotcha.
The story, the lived experience is you. But why are you telling it? Because there's a lesson you learn from it that somebody else may be able to benefit from. So trust the stories. Your story is the best way for you to become more comfortable. Let me tell you, last time you were at the dinner table and somebody asked you how your day was. Last time Thanksgiving happened and people were sitting around the table, right? Or last time you were watching the Super Bowl and either you were happy about what happened or you weren't happy about what happened. Y'all was sitting around and telling stories. When we get together as former classmates, right? At like a homecoming, right? What are we doing? We're telling stories. It's the most natural form of communication and conversation. So let's take that public speaking word out of the equation and just understand storytelling will take you far.
Man, listen, the passion that you have is it just oozes out of you, man. And I love seeing when people are passionate about something and they're doing it, that's their life work. That's to me that's what I like seeing. Right. So you are very convincing, man. All right. So how do people get in touch with you if they want help in this area, interviewing or public speaking or all other things that you provide? How do people get in touch?
Best way to get in touch with me is definitely through LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn, like LinkedIn, don't know LinkedIn, right? So look up Mark Williams on LinkedIn. Also, look up the Speaker Skills Academy. Speaker Skills Academy. We just like we are now a year into this. And like I said, this is a revolutionary thing. Nobody is doing this. We have basically taken the craft of teaching people how to speak and completely gamified it. We do drills. Nobody comes to give a speech. We come to take a skill and we practice it in a number of different ways. Some people call it feels like game night every time we come together, and we're not a class and we're not a program. We're a community. So people come together for like twice or sometimes 3 times a week. And it's like, oh, what are we working on today? Oh, working on some facial expressions. And we'll do a whole bunch of gamified things to really work on our expressions. Or, today we want to talk about humor, and we'll do a whole bunch of games and drills around helping you to use humor. So if you want to find me, go to Speaker Skills Academy and look me up. I'd love for anybody to join us and hang out with us for a little bit. And I'll say the last one you want to find out, it's about to go down.
Okay.
So that's the web show / podcast that I'm inviting you on, my friend. All right, I'm gonna send that formal invitation out. It's About to Go Down is a show that I do with my friend Kathy, where we talk to people about ideas that they have.
Okay.
And we just have an idea conversation. So LinkedIn,
All right.
Speaker Skills Academy, it's about to go down. Those are all the different ways to find Mark Williams, and check out any of my books, man. I'm writing books and trying to put stuff out there. I got a book called Beyond Limitations, a book called Every Day Should Be Tuesday, and a book called The Rules of Engagement for Public Speaking, man. So
Really?
look
Okay.
me up, man. And if you don't like anything that I'm producing,
All right.
I will point you in the direction of some other source, because I always say this, it doesn't have to be me,
Right.
but I will help you to find what you need to be the better you.
Man, that was a good speech. Listen, man, it's a pleasure, just getting together with you and chopping it up. This was a real blessing, man, and I just want to thank you for coming by.
Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you.
Let's stay in touch, and we're forming tech nights.
That's right.
Yeah, man. So listen, be good, man, and thanks again, and we appreciate you.
Take care, man. Good luck to you. Can't wait to hear your next speech.
All right, we'll talk.
Peace.
If I ever took a loss, I learned a lesson. I won't ever think I'm better than the next man. I've been down before to come up, I ain't stressing. Baby, I'm too busy counting.